Welcome to Blueprints for Liberty, Designing the Freedom Cities of Tomorrow. This is a podcast that explores the visionary concept of freedom cities and how we can create living environments that prioritize individual liberty, social harmony, and equal opportunities for all. We look back through history to see how the past informs the future and how people can self-organize in their communities to support self-sufficiency. We also look to develop leaders that are moral and ethical in a world that is spinning out of control. Tune in to be part of the conversation shaping the future of our communities. Hello and welcome. I am joined today by Sarah Shepard, and I'll let her, introduce herself a little bit here in a minute. But what I would like to talk about today is leadership, particularly leadership in the world in which we live today and in the world which is, in my opinion, evolving into a place where it can be kind of scary with the convergence of AI and Web3 technologies and, the crypto revolution and all that kind of thing. Those things scare some people, they excite some people, but I think all of us agree that these technologies can be used in extremely harmful ways that could disrupt and destroy society in ways no other technology has ever been able to do. Even with the advent of the printing press, and as scary as that was, and all the good things that came out of it, and we like to focus on those good things, there was a tremendous amount of disruption. But that disruption wasn't necessarily on a global scale at the rapid rate that we're seeing with AI and Web3 and other types of technology similar to that, including CRISPR technology, gene editing technology. There's just a whole host of things that are going on in the world. So it can be a scary place, it can be an exciting place, but I think more importantly, it can be a wonderful opportunity if we learn how to become leaders. And that doesn't mean, in my opinion, that you need to lead an organization, but that you lead in a way that embraces your consciousness and in a way that allows you to become the best person you can be, understanding that by doing that these technologies can then be harnessed to improve the world around us and not destroy the world around us. So on that note, I invited Sarah to join this conversation because she's got some specific insights that I found very helpful in my own life. I've engaged with a lot of different types of counseling or mindset training, and for whatever reason, they haven't been able to reach down deep inside of me and touch that part of me that makes me want to embrace who I am and become the best I can be. And so on that note, I will turn it over to Sarah for a few minutes and let her introduce herself, and she can tell us a little bit about what I invited her here to talk about. Might interrupt her and ask some questions or have a comment here or there, but really what she has to say we've discussed in the past, and I've just been so impressed with it that I wanted her to share it with you. Thanks.
Thanks, Cheryl. My name is Sarah Shepard. I am a awakening health expert. I teach mystical anatomy and human awakening, as well as I've been an entrepreneur for a little over 20 years, and I am very passionate about the role of leadership and entrepreneurship in creating a healthy alignment with what's possible in humanity, and from the perspective of conscious business and conscious leadership. So that's how we met, was a shared mutual passion around these elements. One of the ways that I work with bringing this into the world, the application of it, is I teach both health and wellness practitioners as well as entrepreneurs and leaders, and then people that are struggling with what I call kind of the dark night of the soul, or these moments of coming to oh my gosh, I have a physical expression of something and I don't know why, and all of the other systems have failed me. And so they usually find me through that sort of channel of, I have this health issue, and it's actually a spiritual issue or a soul issue that has not been able to be acknowledged. And so I teach people how to use their hologenic profile, which is a profile that's been brought into the world by Richard Rudd, who is the founder of a company and a learning platform called the Gene Keys. And I walk people through their own curated health awakening plan and then connect them with people that are facilitators, whether that's therapists or shamans or sound bath people, or it's like the variety of practitioners that are supporting the embodiment of it is just endlessly expanding right now. And I do this through my software system. So I have a software company called Karmawell Health, and we build awakening health plans. They're in the first version of it. The awakening health plans right now are between two marketplaces, between the practitioners that are supporting it and the people that are looking for guidance or support in how to live their awakening pathway. And the next iteration of it will involve businesses funding their employees to be able to do this, to create support in awakening. And that's what I believe that businesses are actually for. The higher ordering principle of business is to be this protective father figure in our tribe, our human tribe, our collective tribe of awakening. So I build programs that you would normally call an insurance system program of working with people. I build those for spiritual awakening instead of kind of looking at the symptom of I've got neck pain, I should see so-and-so. I'd say you've got heart pain related to an unclarified ancestral field element. And when we look at what's causing it in your genome and your genetics, and we work on that, that illness spontaneously goes away. That illness is only a symptom of the conditioning that we haven't had in our time of awakening yet, this conditioning that has said that it's related to our material realm and not the consciousness realm. And now the consciousness realm is coming down into earth. It's coming down into expression. And as we wake up to this, it can be alarming to people. That can feel like this, oh, I don't know if I trust the world, and I don't know if I trust what's going on, and I don't know if I trust the physicians anymore, and I don't know if I trust my company anymore, and sort of all of these things. What I do is I show people how all of this is actually perfect, and that we're really just learning how to tune our instrument better. And that's what's happening right now, is we're all in a collective attunement to better. And I'm helping people come to that alignment so that we can harmonize and we can all play as this big collective orchestra, which is what humanity is, from what I understand.
Well, let me ask you a quick question. In terms of Western medicine, Eastern medicine, you know, if somebody comes to you and let's say they have cancer, you know, I mean, I'm totally on board, and I really do believe that we as a society in particular, I believe more so in the past, you know, hundreds of even thousands of years ago, people did look for root causes, like what's causing this? Let's really dig down and find out what's wrong and make it go away. Whereas now it's just, oh, let's just treat the symptoms, and everything's about treating the symptoms, and unfortunately, in many cases, making money off treating the symptoms.
So what's the question?
How much do you include Western and even like some Eastern medicine techniques in your belief system, not just your practice, but your belief system?
Yeah, I mean, both. So Eastern medicine has been around and been practiced for a much longer time. It has a more global look at the body than what I understand of Western medicine. So Eastern medicine, whether that's Ayurvedic medicine or Chinese medicine, shamanic medicine also follows this. It looks at the system, the ecology of the body, and goes, how do we increase the overall health of the ecology of the system so that the symptoms aren't showing up as a result of the overall health? So if you were to take a look at a garden and you said, okay, I've got these weeds growing, you could pull the weeds out constantly and they would keep coming back. Or you could look at the soil, you could look at the amount of sun exposure, and you could look at a way to build the health of the plants that you want to grow up and then your garden would thrive and the weeds would not be able to thrive. And so they just wouldn't grow there. And so cancer is a great example of that. If you can increase the vibrational frequency, the vitality of the body, it won't have symptoms of disease in it, because symptoms of disease are expressions or symptoms of a low vitality in the body. So by taking that look at it and applying the gene teaching around it, a symptom is an indication of stuck energy. It's either in a avoidant pattern or a reactive pattern where I can't see what I'm choosing in my life. And so I keep choosing it, and I choose it long enough that my body then says, okay, this is the byproduct of your choice. And cancer is a great example of the byproduct of multiple choices creating a disease or an inharmony or an imbalance in the body. That might be exposure to radiation. That might be exposure to toxic emotions. That might be exposure to an epigenetic expression that wasn't resolved in a past generation that's now showing up in your body. Either way, your vessel can change that based on how it's willing to respond to it. And that's the teaching of the gene keys, is that our physical matter body is showing us how to align with our higher essence all the time. And Western medicine, to kind of what you were saying, looks at the symptom and goes, how do we relieve or remove the symptom, as opposed to how do we look at what is the greater cause of the lack of vitality in the system?
Okay, thank you. So from there, in our conversations, we had talked a little bit about, correct me if I'm wrong, like 2027 being a year when the planets kind of align and some things are going on cosmically that, influence or play into these conscious leadership ideas that we're sharing. And yes, I choose to call my program Harmonic Leadership, because I believe that conscious leadership is one element of leadership that we need to focus on, but I believe there are, in my program, 3 elements, because conscious leadership should embrace this quiet leadership, this empathy, humility, being in tune with people that you're working with, and to that end, to be a servant leader, to be a practitioner where you're not necessarily in it all about me and my company and how are we going to make money. I mean, I have no aversion to making money, because money is essential in the world we live in today to survive. But on the flip side, when it's your primary motivation, I think that's when we start going down paths that aren't necessarily good for humanity in general and for us as individuals. So run with that one.
Yeah. So what you're speaking about, that's from the perspective of the Great Awakening. We might as well just go into the Great Awakening, and then maybe what I'll do is I'll just kind of like earmark that how this conversation came about was, you've got this program, Harmonic Leadership, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting that you named it Harmonic Leadership. Do you know that that's a part of the Great Awakening, which led you to be like, whoa, can you tell me more about Sarah? So let's talk about the Great Awakening and sort of where this is coming from. It's always a little bit uncomfortable for me. I just don't want to acknowledge like this part of like, I didn't grow up with organized religion. I grew up in an area where the way that we looked at humanity and what was happening in humanity was nature spiritual, not necessarily organized religion spiritual. And that was because my dad came from a long line of feeling in his life like he was controlled by the dogmatic nature of religion. And so, in many generations, you see this, like whenever one generation has a high expression, that the next generation tends to go in the other direction to create harmony. This is how we learn as a species, is like we swing like this pendulum. And this is what Lao Tzu was saying with like the middle way and the middle path and sort of all of these elements. Harmony is like searching for this middle path. Humanity is parts of these greater elliptical awakenings that are related to our physical matter bodies being at a certain density of consciousness that only orchestrates things based on the evolution of our nervous system to the degree that our nervous system can handle it. And our nervous system has been a survival nervous system for thousands of generations. And it's served us to build societies to the degree that we've built these societies. In the time that we're in, where this awakening is shifting, our nervous system is responding to the potential of holding these angelic or godlike frequencies within our body. That was not available to our nervous system before. And so we outsourced it and we said, God is outside of us. We're a servant to the outside world. And what's happening now is humanity is able to hold a higher and higher amount of frequency as we collectively care for one another, as we collectively aren't fighting for our life in the same way. As we have more food on our table, we have less disease, we're able to live longer, we're able to transpose information from past generations, we're able to take our lessons from history and integrate them into our nervous system. That leads to greater and greater levels of intelligence. When we have more intelligence combined with more safety, we have greater organizational capacity within our communities, and that leads to a relational consciousness, that leads to our ability to care for one another, because we're not just trying to care for ourselves. When we care for one another, the frequency of our nervous system starts to increase. You notice these things, and this is where organized religion did a beautiful job of it. You notice the heart opening and feeling really great when it's in service to our community. So in Buddhism, we call that a sangha. You know, in organized religion in the West, it's a combination of the church or the communal group. And when we feel that, we feel a sense of purpose and what life is all about. And that's really what this is like humanity is coming to this place where it's for a long time, for 2,000 years, been longing to understand what's it all about? You know, what does God want from us? And now we're starting to realize like, oh, it's about caring for each other. It's about us loving one another. Jesus had it right. It's about compassion for your fellow man in a way that we can be of service to each other. But he was one of many deities that have come into the field of consciousness. And now the result of that, in the ways that it took us as far as it's taken us, is that we're starting to recognize that we can hold a collective community amongst the world when we're willing to take care of one another in this way. So this shifts what happens in our DNA to hold more frequencies that are angelic frequencies. Is, the language that we use is quite limiting. It's hard to dialogue about these things unless you've had an experience, a mystical or an ecstatic experience of remembering, like, what's it all about? And, a really great parallel to that is like this holding your baby for the first time. You're going to create the neurotransmitters or the chemical match to what it's all about. It's called oxytocin. And it's like, I would die for you. I will do anything for you. I love you so much. I know what the purpose of my life is. And humanity, because of the beauty of our nervous system doing such a good job surviving, now we're looking for more and more purpose. It's not just enough to have a baby. We want to have more purpose in being of service to the world. We want to have more purpose in our career. We want to have more purpose of being able to increase the collective frequency of the world. And so the prophecy was that this was always going to happen. Shamans have been saying for thousands of years that in the time that we're in, humanity will all begin to wake up to remembering that we're an expression of spirit. What's really beautiful to kind of understand about this is that we can't do it wrong. This is going to happen anyway. If you call it AI or you call it wars or you call it all of these things, all that's happening there is an outside externalization of what's happening internally. So if we're warring against our emotional consciousness that's within ourself, which is our guidance system, longing, that same emotion of love that happened with oxytocin, that same emotion is showing up and it's being externalized in the world. As divine order starts to come down into this recognition that we are an embodiment of this, we start to be able to hold that frequency, and all of humanity starts to increase its vibrational frequency. So those that are living in a shadow or a density or a hate field or an anger field or sort of these denser consciousnesses, they start to come up a little bit. And then that bumps the people that are at the higher ordering principle frequencies up even higher. And then they bring that information down to more and more people. So the collective tribe of humanity is more or less like this one big family that's floating in consciousness. And as it starts to raise up, all of us start to carry each other up. And that's what's happening right now. When we talk about the Great Awakening, that's what's happening. And this is where it gets really metaphysical, because then we start to look at like, actually nothing's outside of you. All of it's within you. You're in an illusion. You're in a matrix. What's happening on the outside is really just this expression that you're creating because you're projecting it into the world. This is what depth psychology is, right? Consciousness is just light. Your challenges, your wounding, your whatever become your barriers that block the light from shining through you. And then you see a world of war, or then you see a world of negativity, or then you see a world of money is bad or money is good or whatever it is. Those are all the projective illusion. But at the base of it is pure love, is pure light. That's a big jump for a lot of people. Like, that's just a little bit too woo. We hear this all the time. Well, that's a little too woo for me. And it's like, yeah, for sure. You got to work with where you're at. And so, that a whole kind of principle of like, okay, how do we meet people with where they're at when we have had nervous systems that are super triggered from the unsafeness of the world? In some places of the world, in many places of the world, it's very unsafe. And we're really attached to our material things, our material identities, our egoic kind of idea of ourself. And it's got a density to it. It's got a weight to it. And so the program that we did, was called Liberated Leadership, for this reason of like, what happens if we started recognizing all of where our attachments are that are keeping us at this density? And instead we started looking at, am I choosing this attachment to this density? Or am I able to show up in the world in a greater capacity, in a greater way? And it turns out our health improves, our purpose improves, our communities improve, our families improve. All of these things start to be the new symptoms, the healthy symptoms of an aligned person. So back to the Richard Rudd thing, he figured out that each person, based on where they're born, has a perfect way of coming to meet their density, looking at their density, repatterning their nervous system, living from their gifting frequency, and that ultimately they can activate these superpowers that are latent in the DNA. So 98%, 97%, it varies, many percent of human DNA has been discovered to be junk DNA or non-coding DNA. With a lot of Bruce Lipton's work, a lot of the advancements in genetics, turns out a lot of this has to do with our ability to respond in a safe way to what's showing up, as opposed to shutting it down. We live in this fear field because as something shows up, it's like, that can't be what it is. And that becomes our projection and we shut it down and we don't actually meet what's showing up there. When we meet what's showing up and we bring our conscious, witnessing, loving body to fear, to insecurity, to whatever that shadow is, we actually take the charge away from it. And the DNA starts holding more and more health, more and more vitality, more and more consciousness, and we start to shift our DNA over. The whole philosophy of Gene Keys is by applying slowness, by applying contemplation, by applying an open receptivity to life, we begin to engage with these higher ordering principles of life. And we begin to remember that we're capable of so much more love, so much more understanding, so much more compassion. And those are just higher frequencies. There's just a frequency band of shame, guilt, victimization. Those are frequencies of consciousness. Your mind is a frequency receiver. It's picking up frequencies and making sense of them. We call them thoughts. And then it's turning them into your belief about yourself. And then your body is building cells based on that. So if we change the information that's coming in and we organize it around love and what's possible in the hormone, the feeling, the intuitive body sense, the place that nobody wants to go because it's like, I don't know what's in there. I don't know. I get scared and the mind can't make sense of it. And so it doesn't want to feel what's in the body. Well, this body is a cauldron for transformation. This body is able to change my DNA into a higher essence of what's possible. And all of us want to lead humanity into that space. It's just a matter of whether we're willing to be bad at it for a little while, to not have an answer, to not let the head lead, to be curious. All of these things, every war, disease, everything could be shifted if we're willing to change what's showing up and how we're looking at it.
Yes, and I think, that kind of brings me to my own personal experience with the gene keys, is that I've had a difficult time looking in like that and seeing what's inside there for all the reasons you just articulated. And yet, and it's hard. Hard isn't the right word. It's so counterintuitive, I think, especially in the world we live in, where we're so conditioned. And, I've been studying a lot about ancient wisdom and all that kind of stuff lately. And I'm like, wow, these people were really far more in touch with the elements around them than we are, because we live in this fast-paced world. We don't take time to contemplate. We don't take time to slow down and to kind of explore. So these ideas are not new and they are not revolutionary. They're just, in my opinion, something we've kind of gotten away from. And in the process of getting away from them, we have, in a sense, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, kind of lost a little bit of who we are.
Yeah. So the thing that has happened is with science and the revolution, it's kind of this beautiful thing that Darwin brought in, and a lot of the kind of, oh gosh, what's the philosopher that Descartes, like I think therefore I am, kind of put the mind ahead of everything. And so what happened was then all of a sudden mind got prioritized. Now, this always meant to happen because the brain actually did need to grow. And the other thing is when we started learning how to cook our food, and we started living longer and we were able to consume more calories, then the brain could grow to be bigger. And now we've gotten to the capacity of like the nervous system that was meant to develop to the way that it's developed cannot develop anymore without integrating into the feeling body. So we've got 3 intelligence systems, but we've only been talking about one for the last, because we got so excited. We're like, oh my gosh, we've got this brain and studying neuroscience. And then we've got these microscopes and we can study light and we can like get into the body. And I was a massage therapist for 20 years. And I studied fascia, and fascia was this thing when I first started studying it, which was like, yeah, it's this packing system that holds muscles and tendons in the body. And now we know that it's this like, because we've got this invention of a camera that can go in and see it while it's live, it turns out it's a crystalline matrix that holds light, which like emits our light frequency and is the integration for our soul. But that's only happened in 20 years. Like that is revolutionary. We're living in a revolutionary time because of this. But the mystics have been saying for years, the scientists have been trying to kind of prove or disprove. Like, this is what I see science as. And I love science. I'm somebody that is highly analytical and I love looking at these things. But it's always like, this doesn't make sense. That's mysticism. And then science goes in and tries to make it make sense. And then eventually science evolves, and we're in a time of human evolution. That's what we're here for. We're evolving all of this way of looking at it. But now the evolution is actually involution. So we're dropping into the consciousness within ourselves so that we can turn towards the heart brain and the belly brain. When I first started studying all of this stuff, nobody really knew much about the mesenteric nervous system. So we now have polyvagal theory, and turns out our cranial nerves have this incredible capacity to help us regulate our communal intelligence system. When it's offline, we get really stressed out, we're really irritable, and we can't think. But when there's a healthy alignment of the anatomy of the body, where the vagus nerve, which runs from the cranial nerves down into your heart, it's also called the pneumogastric nerve, it runs around the heart, it runs around the belly. Turns out our body has been feeding information up our mind from our gut brain and from our heart brain for ages, but we didn't know what it was. And it's only now that we're discovering, wow, there's this whole other intelligence system that many Eastern principles have been saying. The hara is another word for The solar plexus, another language, or the chakra that's in the belly, is another word for this intelligence system, which is connected to our soul, which is connected to our greater consciousness, which is connected to all of us remembering each other. So when somebody says, Cheryl, drop down into your feeling body, and you've never felt it before, it's like opening that closet door that has had everything packed away in it your whole life of these things that I'm like, well, I'll feel those when they make sense to my brain. And so when you open it, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't feel all of this. And it's overwhelming to the system. You can't just start feeling it without slowly integrating that into your system. And so EMDR, somatic experiencing, Tai Chi, like all of these different ways of moving energy, each body has a way of feeling their energy body. And what's kind of neat is that each person has a profile that will tell you how to feel your energy body. So for you, you have a specific way that will help you integrate that. Pretty fascinating, hey?
It is. And I would say it's complex, but it's not. It's really simple on the surface, but understanding it, at a deeper level it's interesting because we're talking about things that are more esoteric kind of things, but yet you're using a lot of scientific terminology and scientific ideas inside of this. So I think it's beautiful. A lot of times people are like, oh, either you're way out here on all this mystical side or you're over here on the scientific side. And I've always believed that no, why are they not together? Why can't we take both of them and explore them all as much as we possibly can to get the best we can out of them and continue? I think, science, I think this is something that I always kind of joke about is, I've lived long enough and I know, we always say, oh yeah, back then. But even as a young child, I remember them saying, predicting certain things and saying certain things. And science, just for example, and I'm not going to say whether it's good or bad or otherwise, milk's bad for you, eggs bad for you, meat's bad for you, and I'm like, okay. It got to the point, like, if we took all of the things that they said from a nutrition standpoint and said they were bad for us, because now whole grains are bad for us, grains are, wheat's bad for us. I'm like, all we're left to eat? So far, I haven't heard that plants are bad for us. So I think we're okay there. And this is just my own personal, my body's different than everyone else's. So I don't want to, say that this is right or wrong. I went through some of those phases and I said, well, I'm not going to eat this anymore because I want to be healthy. And I quit eating red meat. And I started having a lot of psychiatric symptoms, and I looked for various things and just, it wasn't a conscious decision to go back to eating red meat. But when I did, it was like, oh, a lot of these symptoms were alleviated. And I found out there's certain amino acids in red meat that is really hard to get in any other food source. And those amino acids are the things that feed, parts of your brain that alleviate anxiety. And for me, it was like, okay, now does that mean I'm going to go eat a steak every night for dinner? Come to love steak. So I might want to do that. But no, that doesn't, everything within reason kind of thing. And so, yeah, I've seen science say that, all of these ideas, and then all of a sudden they're not in vogue anymore. And then they change their mind about them, which that's science. I wish people understood that. That is what makes science science, is that it explores something, it comes to a conclusion, but that conclusion isn't the final conclusion. That just means
that's just what we got to today. Yeah.
And it may change totally, or it may be tweaked, or who knows. So, and I look at that same side when I look at, things that are mystic, is okay. It's interesting. Yeah, that's an idea I've never thought of. Or, maybe there's some truth to that. Well, maybe there's a lot of truth to something else. It's all about, in my opinion, not discounting anything that's in this world, but just, and I think that's what I liked about Gene Keys. is it's not things aren't good or bad or right or wrong. They are what they are. And
Well,
as you
and
embrace that, that helps you become the best you can be.
And what if you listen to your body instead of what everything was saying that is constantly changing, that is based on information that you don't
Mhm.
actually know how accurate it is, and sort of all of these things? Like, this is what I mean by consciousness is returning home, which is not that it's outside of me and that somebody else has an answer to what's going to make me healthy. Only you have the answer to what your body needs. And if you're asking other people or what is in vogue or what does the science say or what of all of these things, then you're not asking your body what it needs. And so asking people that have been told for a really long time not to listen to their body, to start listening to their body, is the part that I was saying. Is like, it can be so scary because, like, as you alluded to at the beginning, there's a lot of capitalism around you not listening to your body and you taking the thing that I make money off of as your information instead of you deciding for yourself what that is. And, you know, I've been in times of my life where I was really sick. And so I just want to honor this part of it is really scary when you can't get out of bed and you're in an incredible amount of pain and you're not able to make a cognitive decision because of an expression of psychosis in your body or an expression of extreme fatigue or confusion or these elements that show up when we aren't in alignment. But getting back to that space of alignment is something that I would offer we will all benefit from spending more and more time getting coherent around listening to our gut biome and what's showing up in our gut intelligence. And that might be dissonant with what the dominant idea is. You know, that might be counterculture. Your physician might disagree with you. Your partner might disagree with you. Those are actually spiritual awakenings. When we decide to turn towards ourselves, this is the first step of your spiritual awakening for everybody. I'm going to turn towards me and I'm going to listen to what my intelligence is saying and what my heart is saying is the right direction for me. And then that's going to initiate this whole process of resistance, of evolution within you, of a new journey that you go on to discover who that is. And so, you know, this kind of happens when we're younger too, right? We leave the nest of our home or we get kicked out of it. You know, the initiations come in multiple different ways.
Yeah.
And then you go out into the world and there's all of this new information coming in. There's all of this fear that the survival nervous system is doing a really good job of keeping me alive at that point. And depending on where I land, that survival nervous system might be able to come to a slowing down into listening to what is my heart field saying? What is my gut biome saying? What is my relationship with the outside world saying? Or it might not. And so we have a society that has gone in the direction of not trusting their heart because people benefit from you not trusting your heart, not trusting the intelligence of the awakening consciousness in my belly. And that is really scary now to turn towards and to go back in that direction to find out about it. But I tell you, everything is on the other side of that. Everything you're looking for is on the other side of that very, very valorous choice. What is my life about for me? And what does it really mean to live a good life in a family, in a tribe, in a relationship, in a company? Like, all of it has to do with that root thing. You'll figure that out as a result of turning towards you. And otherwise, you're going to be drawn down a whole bunch of rabbit holes that you're like, that one didn't work. I guess I'll come back to self. Oh, that one didn't work. I guess I'll come back to self. But you know what you get good at? Coming back to self. And then that becomes a journey.
It is. And I just think, you know, from a leadership perspective, kind of circling back to that concept, you know, leadership is taking charge of yourself. And although we in the world, and I've, you know, I host a Sunday night group, and in it, we talk a lot about language, how certain words have come to mean things that they didn't always mean. And certain concepts, certain ideas have been hijacked. And I think in a lot of ways, they were intentionally hijacked for things that aren't good, you know. As just an example, you know, when you say the word astrology, everybody goes, two schools of thought. Either people are mystical and they're like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, I like astrology. And then others are like, ooh, that's like I picked up my newspaper and I'm reading my horoscope in the newspaper and I don't believe in that kind of stuff, you know. But I think that word got hijacked. And rather than being, I mean, it does have predictive qualities to it, but it's really just astrology, if you look it up, is really just about understanding the universe around you, understanding the stars, understanding the planets, understanding the moon, the sun, and how do they interact? How do they relate? And how do they relate to me? You know, understanding that universe communicates with me in a way that it might not communicate with you because, okay, let's get back to the newspaper. I'm a Cancer. And I don't know what you are, but it's communicating with me in a different way. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that because I've been defined as a Cancer that you can say X, Y, and Z about me. It just helps inform more of my journey inward. That's what I think.
That's a really great example, because if we just stay with kind of the medical field and sort of speak about like science and mysticism from this, physicians would never do procedures without consulting the astrologer to find out if it was an ideal time for healing or conducting a procedure, because they found that they had so much more success when they conducted them in alignment with the celestial bodies as opposed to what worked for their schedule. You know, the busyness has really gotten us off track in many, many ways. And, you know, in my early life, I was like, it was my guilty pleasure. It was like, I love astrology, but don't tell anybody. And it was just this thing that I would do with like my sister and my mom and my girlfriends, you know, and I would never want to admit it to the world because people would think I was a whack job. And the founder, like if we go back to like Gene Keys came from this awakening experience that this character had. He became known as Ra Uru Hu, but he was a Canadian man by the name of Robert Krakauer. And he was quite a cynical man who didn't believe in astrology. And he had this voice come into his consciousness and teach him how astrology, how the Vedic sciences, how the quantum biology, the Judaic Kabbalah, and the I Ching, the big one, the I Ching, how all of these esoteric systems are actually a map to the human auric field. And the human auric field is in a relationship with the cosmic breath of stars. So the way astrology works is your electromagnetic system, we'd call that your hormone system and your nervous system, they emit a charge. And that charge that is held in your physical body is reading what's called the neutrino field. The neutrino field is photons from stars when they hit planetary bodies and then come into your auric field. They open and close gates of consciousness within your brain. And then your mind is making sense of this information's coming in. It must be this. So that's the science behind astrology. That's how it affects our physical body in the way that it does. And so if you're born under the astrological window that we name Cancer, Gene Keys and Human Design, they took that and they narrowed it down to a little bit more specific expressions. Those are the expressions of the I Ching. And we did a podcast recently where Chris did a beautiful job speaking about what the I Ching is. But the I Ching is the several thousand, not 7,000. I think the longest dating that they have is 5,000 years. So it's massively old teaching that maps, it's called the Book of Changes. It's what it translates to, is the Book of Changes of how to bring consciousness into life. The other name of it is how to bring heaven to earth. So this Book of Changes of how to bring heaven down to earth shows that within the field, the expression of Cancer, well, there's actually these individual weeks that have a spectrum of consciousness that your vessel is highly attuned to read. So you've got this highly attuned physical instrument that has these unique expressions of consciousness. And when you're in the field of somebody else's auric field, the two of your auric fields are bringing new consciousness to one another. We call this the relational field, and that creates what's called relational intelligence. And when we can meet that with curiosity, instead of I'm right, you're wrong, science says this, my doctor told me this, blah, 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 right? That limits the amount of consciousness that can be experienced. When we take ourselves together and we explore with openness, we create openings in our frequency that allow us to understand the higher ordering principles of the universe. They allow us to collaborate. They allow us to work in synergy. They essentially, what happens is I'm like, Cheryl, you're really good at this. I'm really good at this. Why don't we both do this project together where we can bring more and more peace and harmony to the world? And that'll feel really good for my heart. And then my physical expression of my vitality will raise. And in addition to that, we might solve some of these global crises that are going on in a variety of different ways.
Yes. And circling back a little bit too, the one thing that we had talked about was, you and I in our offline conversations, I should say, about how the planets are aligning to create what we've just talked about. Can you just briefly kind of talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So this whole kind of awakening has a lot to do with what's called the precession of the equinoxes. And the best way to kind of describe that is if you took the North Pole and the South Pole and you drew a line down the North Pole and the South Pole and you put a sword through the center of the Earth. The precession of the equinoxes is going to take that sword and it's going to tip it toward different planet or star alignments. So our Earth is moving, it has been moving for several thousand years in this direction. And if you watch many of the kind of ancient studies of like all these temples that have been built, well, they've been built to track how the stars align with the horizon and how to align in ceremony with consciousness. So humanity has been doing this pre-dawn of time. This has been happening pre-biblical, like when we really start to study all of these things, it was like, well, there was actually, the pre-deluge humanity did build all these temples. We have evidence of it. It's all over the world. We've been tracking this for a long time. It turns out that the Earth is tipping a little bit gradually over time. And as a result of this tipping, what's happening is we're aligning more with the expression of our auric field, becoming more capable of holding more and more unity consciousness, more and more collaborative consciousness, more and more love, really is what it is we're moving in this direction of returning to love. And the simplicity of that process is that there's these vehicles that we have for creating a healthy environment for our nervous system to hold more love. One of them is knowing that you're in a vehicle and it has specific needs. Your vehicle has a specific auric need that is unique to you. When we start parenting our children in this way, when we start running our companies in this way, where we're asking and understanding, all right, for you to thrive in this company, there's certain expressions of the environment that will really make it so the company makes more money and the team has more coherence and we all aren't working so much and we all feel like we're living out our purpose, all of those things. When I look at that orchestration of a company from that perspective, you thrive, I thrive, we're high-fiving everybody all the time. That's one of the vehicles, knowing what that is for you. The second vehicle is knowing what your nervous system needs in relationship to turn towards that very scary space of the feeling body and start to recognize, hang on, there's some big wisdom in here. And I've never felt safe to do that before. The best way to do that is in our relationships, with our significant other, in our relationships with our close family members. For many people, myself included, at times, that is a battlefield. It is not safe for me to express what's showing up in my feeling body because the person I'm expressing it to takes it personally, can't integrate it, thinks it's about their ego, thinks it's about all of these things, and then nothing changes. But when we can start to apply these basic techniques of turning towards the body, giving the divine wisdom to the feminine to be the voice box, I call it the oracle of the body, the oracle of my body has a connection to the universe. And this is what's showing up in my feeling body. The masculine nature, whether it's a man or a woman, however this shows up, witnesses this, holds space of protection, creates an environment for the feminine body to process all of these elements. This is where the really kind of neat epigenetic parts show up. So the work that Bessel van der Kolk has done around PTSD, the work that Gabor Mate is doing in the world around addiction and trauma. This is all related to our ability to hold a relational field where it's safe to feel what we're feeling. You know, the epidemic of drug use, of suicide, of depression, this comes from isolation. It comes from not feeling safe to feel what we're feeling. So when we start to turn towards that, again, this processing happens where there's a freedom to flow in life. There's a freedom to understand our purpose. There's a freedom to come to a recognition. And that changes the frequency of my body in such a way that I start to hold more consciousness in me. I start to hold more capacity for openness and showing up in the world. And the nature of that is I want to serve. I want to serve my community. I want to serve the world so that they can experience this too. So these are these processes that are built into what's called the golden path. And so when we did our program together, we were looking at the Pearl sequence, which is about leadership from that space. How do we show up? In what way am I using my life force to be of service to all of humanity? And I'm going to keep struggling with that if I can't figure out what my life force needs to feel safe in my body. If it doesn't feel safe in my body, that very consciousness is not going to drop in. I'm not going to be able to listen to that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to be outsourcing it and asking everybody else, what do you think I should do? What job do you think I should have? I'll be chasing this thing outside of me all the time. When I feel safe to come home, when I feel safe to reside in this space, my energy, my vitality increases, and I want to devote my energy to more things. And so those are related to the planets. It's quite a wild kind of thing. This is what astrologists have been saying, and this is what's so neat about the time that we're in. Next week, there's what's called a planetary parade. So you know, every planet is lining up in the sky in one kind of alignment where it's really rare for us. The way that the whole thing moves around is that they're never all aligned like they are. And there's this really significant time of this planetary alignment that's coming up. But Jupiter is this really beautiful one that's in expression right now. And there's this relationship with Jupiter and the Pearl sequence, which is how do I serve in my highest expression? And you have your highest expression of how you can serve and how that'll be recognized by the collective and how it'll be celebrated by the collective. And we'll be able to clap and be like, Cheryl, thanks for shining your light in the way that it makes it so easy for all of us to do the same. And I have my own. So looking at that from the perspective of how do we create harmony within an organization is really what this is like how we apply this to corporate leadership. How do we create a harmony in human, because we're light and sound fields of consciousness. So when we really start to tune our instruments so that we're singing and shining together, now we have a corporation, now we have a village, now we have this incredible capacity to show up in the world. And so that's what really drew you into this, was you were like, wait a second, what? There's a way that we could bring this type of leadership to humanity. And not only is there a way, but there's actually a very specific curated pathway for each person to move through their awakening. Yeah, that's what's happening right now. And that's how the planets are orchestrating this shift. Now, the mechanics have a lot to do with two gene keys that we need to talk about. So coming back to the I Ching, there's 64 gene keys or 64 hexagrams from the I Ching. If you're following it from a human design perspective, they're called gates. They're gates of consciousness from a human design perspective. The I Ching was like, no, they're like expressions of masculine and feminine that have to do with the earth. It just all depends on the languaging that you're using and how capable people are of understanding it. But if we just take these two, I like to call them teachers. There's a teacher that has this number, and there's a teacher that has this number. And each of them have a frequency that they're longing to get our vessel to align with. They're longing to harmonize with this vessel in this way. The teaching of the 55th gene key is that we're moving through this awakening, and that was always going to happen with the precession of the equinoxes. The equinoxes were aligning us with the teaching of the 55th gene key. And the 55th gene key's wife is the 59th gene key, which is about intimacy. So if we can't be honest with our intimate experience of what it means to be a human, we won't be able to awaken to what's possible. The 55th gene key is like, here's an awakening to what's possible. And the 59th gene key is, this is where it is. It's in the body. When I turn towards this, I have a deeply intimate relationship with what's showing up for me. That same thing becomes in a family, in a village, in a corporation, all of them. They're all just these nested ecologies of consciousness. And so that's where we're going in this time. And it's shifting from the two that were an expression, the two kind of old guard teachers that are coming out, that are shifting to the new guard teachers, is happening in 2027. So the actual date I can look up, it's like May something. Ironically, it's May something in 2027. But yeah, there's this time where the precession of the equinoxes will alter the planetary consciousness in such a way that we'll have access to new teachings. And this is why we're in a time where it looks like the whole world is crumbling, is because the old teachers are like, I'm getting ready to retire. We can plan a party for me exiting because I'm no longer your teacher anymore. And everybody's like, what? You've been our teacher for 2,000 years. You can't just leave. And it's like, but don't worry, there's new teachers coming in. And as humans, we just are terrified of change, which is the funniest thing, because the only thing that is a for sure in this world is change. That's the whole point of it. That's why somebody wrote a book called The Book of Changes. A very long time ago, a wise king decided, hey, we could teach the world about this. And then the information got, it went in many different directions. We'll just say that. So there's just another chapter coming online. That's all that's happening. There's just another teaching that's coming about. And so imagine if companies got on board with this. Imagine this was something that, pharma. I'm like, why does pharma try to take a look at this? Because you'd really be able to pivot your business model to be in alignment with this. Why aren't insurance companies looking at this from this model of like, hang on, there's people all over the world that are consciousness coaches that are helping humanity awaken. Why aren't we working with them?
That's exactly. And, it's so universal. And I guess somewhat scientific term. And there's this, everything's about quantum computing, quantum physics, quantum mechanics, quantum everything. But the one I really like, and I think is relevant today, is the idea of quantum thinking, which simply, I'm sure means I'm able, because we've talked about so many things that I am sure are way outside the comfort zone of most people. And in addition to that, are way outside their even knowledge or understanding. And I learned this a long time ago. Oddly enough, even as a child, I kind of grasped this concept from a religious perspective. There were times when I would be taught something and I would go, oh, that doesn't make sense, or, oh, I'm not sure I agree with that, or, oh, I don't like that. So I'd put it in a bucket and I would say, maybe someday I'll understand that. Maybe someday I will be able to deal with that. And that's where I think for all those people who've just listened to this and go, whoa, this is either too much or I don't agree or whatever, take all this information and put it in that space. Because quantum thinking is being able to hold something in a space until you're ready to either embrace it or maybe in some cases disregard it, because you've got authority who clearly has proven it wrong or whatever. I think I consider myself very blessed in this way that I have been able to hold on to a lot of teachings and things in my life that just for whatever reason just didn't resonate until I was ready to take it out. And I think in my own personal life, that's why Gene Keys resonated with me. I don't think I was ready for this years ago. I'm ready for it now, and I'm ready to take it out, and I'm ready to start working with it and engaging with it on a different level. So my personal goal for this is not trying to convert you to any ideas or anything, is just to open your eyes to a new way of thinking, a new way of approaching the world, and hopefully it will help you find more peace as we go through these periods of turmoil and change, because I think we all know and we all see that's where we're at. So I'll give you final thoughts.
the thing that you're speaking about is something that we both have in common, and that has a lot to do with us both being the 6-2 expression in our gene keys. Like when we look at the profile, we have a really global way of looking at elements and a capacity to comprehend and understand a lot because of it. So one of the things that I've observed, my son's autistic, and one of the things that I've spent a lot of time trying to understand is like, what are the parameters that help a nervous system, help a brain to grow? How do we make a brain that will grow, right? As a parent, I think these are things that we care about. I want to have an intelligent child. I want to put them in an environment where their brain can grow. One of those things that can't be supportive to that is fear. Your brain cannot hold multiple ideas simultaneously when you're afraid for your life. So if something threatens your capacity to feel like you belong to something, the response is going to be, I'm afraid. That idea conflicts with my family. That idea conflicts with my religion. That idea conflicts with my belonging to something. It's only when we feel safe to ask questions that don't threaten our need to belong that we can actually evolve in our consciousness. So then that would be my thing, is ask yourself, do you feel like your belonging is being threatened? You won't be able to learn if it is. My son can't learn a concept like reading, taking a symbol, bringing that into his eyes, integrating that into a neural pathway when his brain is worried about if he's going to, be able to regulate himself. It's just not going to happen. So why would I put him in a situation like that? His brain won't be able to grow. But this happens all the time in our society, as we overstimulate ourselves into the space of fear where we're hyper vigilant in our workspace, in our communities, in our families, and then we're not able to hold these concepts where our brain is mapping itself. I love teaching this because I taught yoga for a while. If you do a balancing pose and you're standing on one leg and you're teetering, when you're teetering, your brain is sending impulses down to the muscles, and the muscles are sending impulses back to the brain, and they're kind of tuning the instrument. Oh, don't go too far left. Don't go too far right. Gradually, if you do that, you'll get really good at staying upright. But a lot of the time, what do we feel when we're not balancing? We feel shame. We feel ridiculous. We feel like we don't belong. We feel like we're not good at the yoga pose. I don't want to do something I'm bad at because my ego is like, you're bad at this. And then we give up and we just stop. But if we're willing to stay with the awkward, if we're willing to keep showing up and not being very good at balancing, you know what you get good at? Balancing. So it's really that. Do you feel like you can keep showing up in the awkward, being open to and curious, or do you feel like this concept is going to be in a direct conflict with my identity around myself? And if you do, it can be tricky to get past that. It can be tricky to feel like it's safe for the brain to learn. And so the more we can create environments where you're allowed to not know, you're allowed to have it not make sense. You're allowed to get upset about that. You're allowed to get frustrated. You're allowed to whatever it is. And then it still feels fun. Well, I'm still curious. I still want to hang out with these people. They piss me off, but I want to know more. This company is doing this new thing. It's very different than what I've ever experienced before. And I don't know, there might be something to it. Like that right there might be something to it, leads to big epiphanies. And so that would be my advice, is like, are you a little bit curious about why all of this is happening? Are you a little bit curious that you might have a greater gifting that your soul really wants you to discover in all of this, that would make you healthy, would make you happy, would make you experience all of the things that you've been longing to experience? That would be something I'd be wanting to explore a little bit more.
I think that's the perfect advice. And, no matter where you are in your journey, are you open to learn a little bit more?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, truly.
Thank you so much for your time. You're a wealth of knowledge, and I just value our time together so much. Thank you so much. And
yeah, you're welcome.
Until our next conversation, how's that?
Sounds good.
All right, thanks.